Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff. Looks like he's absent. Dr. Joel Schroeder.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
And Miss Diane Nguyen. Looks like she is absent. And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening we have Father Terry Hedrick from Church of the Resurrection on 37th Street to lead us in prayer.
Let's pray together. Almighty God and Father, we come to you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, giving you thanks for your presence here with us now by your Holy Spirit. As we gather, we give you thanks that you are a good and gracious God, abounding in mercy and steadfast love. We pray for all those in authority, for the President, for President-elect, for the Senate and House of Representatives, and for all the leaders of the nations. In the coming days, weeks, and months, and even years, we ask that reconciliation and healing would prevail in our country. We also pray specifically this night for the city of Bel Aire, especially for Mayor Jim Benage, the individual city council members, and all the leaders of this community. We continue to pray during this time of the COVID-19 virus that you would endow caregivers with compassion and generosity, bring healing to those who are ill, protect those who are most at risk, give comfort to those who have lost a loved one, and welcome those who have died into your eternal kingdom. Stabilize our community, Lord. Unite us in your compassion. Remove all fear from our hearts. Fill us with confidence in your care. And may the rollout of the vaccine be efficient, effective, and timely, especially to all those who need it most. Tonight, we also pray that you would reveal to the city council the knowledge of your will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding in order that they may be fruitful in their service. Anoint them with the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose for the common good, they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people in the Bel Aire community. Grant that they may love mercy, do justice, and walk humbly with you. Finally, we remember the gospel, that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself. May we be ambassadors of that same gospel of reconciliation. We ask all this in the strong and wonderful name of our Savior Jesus, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, our advocate and guide, one God, both now and forever. Amen.
Please stand with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the term agenda additions. Are there any agenda additions to consider? There are none, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. It contains only the minutes of the January 5th City Council meeting. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I move to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second.
First by Mr. Smith and second by Dr. Schroeder. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Item 7A is consideration of appropriation ordinance 2001-20 or just 21-01. This report includes some large capital improvement expenses. $468,000 went toward public infrastructure projects in Rock Springs 3 and for the Woodlawn expansion project. Any discussion concerning the appropriation?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll move to approve appropriation ordinance 21-01.
I'll second.
First by Mr. Smith and second by Mr. Welch. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Trust the city appearances. First, we have a presentation of Christmas lights winners. I'd like to introduce Ashley Sherwood from our rec department, who is here to present the first, second, and third place trophies, the winners of the 2020 Bel Aire Christmas lighting contest. Ms. Sherwood. She read it well.
Here? Sure, okay. I have the honor tonight and giving out the holiday displays for our Bel Aire Bright Christmas Light Contest. And in first place, we have Lily Tay on Summerside, second, Craig Morgan on Remington, and Brent Titus on Memphis. Just congrats all the winners, and thanks for all who voted and sent in the displays. And we have Brent here this evening, so let's give a round of applause to him.
I'm the only one here.
Yeah.
I just did a recount.
No, you got to lose the other two.
Mayor, would you like to
All right. Sorry? Yeah, okay. There you
give it to him?
go. Yeah. There you go.
Great, congratulations.
Got it. All right. Thanks.
Now you can add that to your collection, right? I went for next year's display.
Congratulations.
Good, so that was all we had.
Yes, I'm
I thought so, but I wanted to make sure you went to somebody else. Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have Mr. Chad Carosa from WAMPO. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Director Chad Carosa, who is here to discuss the WAMPO funding situation and potential alternatives. And please come to the podium if you would. For those who may not be aware, WAMPO is the organization, the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. I am on the board and alternate on our board. And what all federal funding for regional projects go through WAMPO. So WAMPO will be helping to fund our Woodlawn project. They do a lot of other projects around there. They're big into the North Junction. There's a lot of projects, and of course we have the list of what's in the project that was just handed out for the meeting. So, Mr. Caruso.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Good evening and good evening to all. Those trophies were beautiful, glowing. Really, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit. With limited knowledge I have about MPO process, I would like to share with you. And if any questions, I would like to, provide answers and more information. Like Mayor said, the federal funds flows through the MPOs. And then MPOs generally is a regional agency, which comprises many small communities and towns. So we really work very closely with all leaders of the cities and towns. It's beneficial both ways because, for the small towns, it's important to see how are we fitting in the big picture with respect to transportation improvements in the region. That's valuable for the small towns. Whereas for the region, it's helpful to understand what are the needs of the local communities to make sure the regional transportation system is in a great shape in terms of maintenance, preservation, and the best possible ways it serves the communities, connecting each other. So that's the main goal of what MPO is throughout the nation. Many cities have MPOs. I was with Columbus MPO for many, many years, 2004 till 2016. And I worked for an MPO in Pennsylvania, and then I'm here with WAMPO Wichita. I graduated from University of Oklahoma in 1990 to 1995 with civil engineering degree. And when we worked with technical staff with each communities, Ann Stephens was very instrumental in helping us selecting these projects. Similarly, Dan Squares from Derby and Jim Weber from County, Sedgwick County, there were great technical staff that helped us select these projects because every year we have about 10 million suballocated funds that WAMPO programs for the transportation projects. But there are so many projects that are competing for those 10 million each year. So the TIP itself is 4-year document with 10 million, approximately 10 million each year. And this TIP is called a short-range transportation plan. Like Mayor was mentioning a minute ago, in the beginning of the meeting, that what's MTP and what is TIP. So I just want to touch base on the discussion that Anne and Mayor were having. The MTP stands for Metropolitan Transportation Plan, that looks at 20 years and beyond, what are the potential transportation projects and the improvements that a region can have. Whereas the 4-year TIP only looks at how can we commit these 10 million each year for next 4 years? What are the projects that we need to commit these dollars for? So because there is a lot of competition from various entities, we need a special committee to look at what projects are of regional significance, what projects connect the region and system very well. So Anne Stephens, the city engineer of Bel Aire, was very instrumental among 6 committee members, project selection committee, that helped us navigate through the difficult process and how we select these projects. Mayor Donna Klassen was also there from City of Mays, and many leaders were there. Councilmember Troy Tabor from Andover was there, and Dan Squares from Derby, Jim Weber from Sedgwick County, and City of Wichita as well. So that's just an outlook and a big picture of what's MTP for 20 years and what's TIP, the short-range transportation plan for the next 4 years. Now comes, how these projects are. I didn't get the entire document. I just got a couple of years, because to get too much information would also be too much. So I just got just 1 page, and I didn't. So the 2021 projects are listed in the page I got, and then 2022 projects also in the handout. As you can see, Bel Aire project, the Woodlawn from 45th Street to 37th Street is being, I heard from answers, it's a fun project, and there may be many things. Much hard work must have been went through in making the projects towards to this stage. Now so these are the list of projects. Now the question I want to touch upon our city manager's highest question, which is, what are the TIP fees? What are WAMPO fees? That's the question. I would like to mention that these are the 2 main questions I want to mention. What's MTP and TIP, our mayor mentioned, and and then what's WAMPO's fees? These federal funds need local matches as well. Just like the way these transportation projects need local matches, 20%, so local entities, cities match, and the federal funds are 80%. In the same way, WAMPO staff and the planning documents that the staff develop and the technical analysis that go behind these projects, working with various entities, need an administrative budget to have the entity in place for the region. And to operate that, there is a budget of 1 million to 2 million approximately. Last year, it was 1.485 in 2019 to function as an MPO with a staff of 7, with technical analysis and work with all agencies, with various committees, and just developing the planning document that federal requirements make the staff do, just to comply with the federal requirements. These documents of coordination, like Anne Stephens helped us in developing the TIP projects and TIP document, And the same way, the MTP document has like 15 technical appendixes in it, like active transportation, transit, you name it, all modes of transportation, walk, bike, trail. And so 1.5 million is the budget of WAMPO to have that entity in place to make these funds flow through the region and get to all cities and communities. Now, this 1.5 million, what happens is it's the same thing. The federal funds match 80%, and the local match needs 20%. So that was the reason why this fee was taking place. The local match is a requirement for the federal funds to make the WAMPO just sustain, with its work and with staff, with all the TPB meetings that our mayor and leaders of entire region, like 23. So just to make those things happen, that entity, so let's say 1.5 million, 80% and 20%, if you look at that match, that 1 million is about 200,000. And 1.5 is about 300,000 local match, whereas the federal funds is 1.2 billion. So that's 20%, 80%, 20%. Forgive me, 80%, 20%. So that's why the tip fee was, increased. Why the fee? The question: what is the fee? Why the fee is the question we want. So that's, and then number two is, what are the mechanisms to get the fee from the local jurisdictions? So the mechanism were two mechanisms. One is the membership fees, and then two, the tip fees. Now, a lot of MPOs throughout the nation, they have per capita fee based on the membership, like population times 47 cents, I think, approximately, average. So what that does is it covers the function of the MPOs in general. But in the Wichita area, that formula was different. If that would be the case, then city of Wichita would pay 175,000 or 180,000 per year to cover the 300,000 something. And rest of the cities have the population times, that per capita fee. So that's in general. But city of Wichita was like, this is too much. 175,000 per year is too much. And they limited it to 20,000. County contributed to 20,000. And rest of all the towns and cities contribute to about 10,000. So 20 plus 20 plus 10 is 50,000. The local fees that WAMPO obtains. And this was in agreement like many years ago before I came. This is in agreement, and I think Bel Aire probably has less than 1,000 per year, I think, something like that. About less than 1,000 because of the small town, and because the 10,000 was distributed based on the population of all the towns within, subtract city of Wichita and subtract county, and rest of the population was divided by 10,000. So what that happened was, where does the rest of the local match come to sustain WAMPO was the question that occurred. So that was the reason why tip fees was increased, because there was no other way. There was only two mechanisms in obtaining this local match. And before I came, Phil Nelson was the director, and there were some negative deficits in the financial stability of WAMPO. So what happened was the board and executive committee, they started discussing how do we fill and come out of this deficit and make financially stable the WAMPO. So these discussions came up, and that's how the discussion of 5% tip fees and 3% tip fees came up. So when we increase the tip fees, certain jurisdictions are uncomfortable because they have projects, but they don't have enough budget to pay 5% or 3%. On the other hand, if we increase the membership fees, there are certain jurisdictions that were uncomfortable. So it was difficult to get that balance where everybody is comfortable. That was what happened when Mayor was there last. There was so much discussion that occurred in the last meeting. when you were there. So that's how 3% came. I saw Bel Aire project, it was in 2021. So I'm happy to answer. That's just, just want to give an overview of what WAMPO, MTP tip, and then what is the fees and that. So I'm happy to elaborate if I didn't answer everything.
But just to make sure we're clear about that, the fee is a two-tier structure. There's a membership fee that we're paying. I can't remember what that amount is. Do you remember that? Okay. And then there's the tip fee that you pay when you're doing a project. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So tip fee is not paid if you're not going to have an active project.
True.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
Very good. I just want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Sure.
A couple of questions. So one, and I understand that these fees have already been changed. This is just an update after the fact. The tip fee was changed at the last meeting. Is that my understanding?
Well,
thought it was paid.
Yeah, it was a
So it's
discussion.
actively being discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were allowing members to discuss until the members are comfortable. And then, are you all comfortable? Let's vote next time. So that's how.
And then I think, I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly, but I think you said that there's about $10 million a year of federal funds that flows through WAMPO.
Yeah, on the TIP projects, yeah.
And the administration, the amount that $10 million of funds is $1.5 million a year.
The 1.5 million is different from the TIP allocation. This 10 million is different from the 1.5 million the staff and the MPO sustains.
But the purpose of the $1.5 million worth of staff is to administrate the $10 million?
Correct.
Okay.
Plus development of transportation plan for the region, plus other things.
Okay. And so as you've looked at the TIP fee deficit and the groups had a discussion, has there been any alternatives down to look at potentially reducing those administrative costs?
There actually has been, and you probably could tell us a little better, but there's been some cutback on staff because of the cost of the overall financial structure of the land. But I can't tell you.
Yeah, Mayor is right. We had some difficulty because we had some layoffs last time, not able to, because of all the deficits in the financial, and restructuring also was one of the reasons. It was pretty difficult financially for the WAMPO to meet those federal requirements, and the functions and the staff levels needs to be more competent in developing those technical appendices and all, primarily to store the data for the region and distribute the data to local communities like traffic counts or the trails and the system and the network. Share with you what we took, like work with technical staff like Ann Stephens and all. So much work is there, and this local match will build.
Mr. Mayor, you've talked about what some of that 1.5 or whatever million does, and you've given a few examples. I would love to sit through some more of those examples and take some time to explain more of all the work that you guys do that's a part of that.
Happy to. Would you like me to say now? Or,
yeah, I'd love to hear them. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is a 5-year transportation plan that federal requirements need the MPO to produce. It's a product. And to develop that 5-year plan, there is a project solicitation going to each communities and request for projects. Staff would work with all communities and they work with the limits of the project and the cost estimates for those transportation projects, not only for roadways, but for all modes of transportation, light trails and system network, maintaining system network. Staff work with GIS mapping to store all the data for the region. That function of the staff is important to produce the document to illustrate how the system is existing system, and then also to illustrate the future 20 years down the road. How does the network look like? Not only the roads, trails and everything, plus the transit as well. When this system is developed by the staff, they not only look at the infrastructure on the ground, but they also look at how the demand is being changing and occurring. What are the trends of the traffic counts? So staff needs to work on those to maintain the levels of, luckily in Wichita, the congestion levels are not that bad as Kansas City or other big cities. It's important for staff to develop those trends, how those conditions were occurring. It's also important to monitor the population growth and the land use changes, how the developments were occurring, housing, the growth of each town and cities, how the growth trends are. So these all go as inputs in developing that transportation plan for the 5 years. Traffic counts, transit ridership. We also have the counts, bike bed counts we do each year, primarily to understand the employment center growths as well, like whether it's growth or loss, monitor those as well. So number of employees, population, households, all this data. I'm just giving some examples, but there is, from census, there's a huge amounts of data, not only of the land use side, but also on the demand and the usage of public and also the infrastructure. So, and then studies like freight study, all those are extra, because how important is the infrastructure serving the freight movement, the truck movements, and where are the issues, where is the truck parking, and what are the technologies and other things. How can the future of the technology enhance these systems in the, so this is just a few examples, but like this, there are like, I'll send you an email on the links of the 15 appendix documents, like air quality monitoring is another important thing. And we also need to demonstrate environmental justice populations, is serving equity and all kinds of stuff, like air quality monitoring is one. And then there's a fiscal constraint analysis, which is also not easy to develop. Staff needs to demonstrate that these are the funds. Once we have the project cost estimates, it's important to stay within, once the budgeted amount from the federal highways are allocated, it's important that the projects are not exceeding the budget allocated. So that's called fiscal constraint analysis. Stuff like that, which is very technical. And there is Nick Flanders in our office who works on travel demand forecasting model. That's another important aspect for the MPOs, to develop a regional model that forecasts traffic and the usage of all modes in the future 20 years. So that needs software and a full-time staff dedicated, working with all communities to get all the data, studies and expansion, constantly monitor if the roadway is expanded, code it, and if the roadway is extended, code in that system, so it's forecasting right, stuff like that. So I just give a few examples, but it goes, on and on.
So are you arguing that, obviously 1.5 million sounds like a big number for staff, right? So are you arguing that these people are keeping track of all these trends and what's happening, therefore when you do allocate money, you don't expand a road that then no one's driving on 5 years later? Is that essentially what you're arguing you're trying to avoid?
Exactly.
Or whatever?
Somewhat of a federal mandate.
Yeah.
Or
avoiding the metaphorical bridge to nowhere.
For a metropolitan area, you have to have these organizations.
It does seem pretty easy that you could expand something and realize that was really dumb thing to build.
You have a great question, because we also monitor the safety aspects also, like crashes. That's important. Like, how do we minimize the crashes in the region? That's a huge part of the development of transportation. That itself has one appendix on just the safety and development, not only, automobiles, but also pedestrians and bicyclists as well. And there's another document which is, infrastructure asset management, that is how many bridges are in not good condition, how many are poor, monitoring those, what infrastructure need, and pavement as well. So it goes on and on, like the appendix and all. So staff is fully dedicated in making sure that data is collected from each entities and, that type of stuff.
I appreciate you giving more examples. I sometimes get nervous with we do lots of stuff hand waving, right? Because sometimes that can mean we do lots of stuff. Sometimes that can mean we don't do anything, right? And so some more examples are helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I also really appreciate those additional examples. When I was first thinking about this, I was thinking, well, if the only thing that WAMPO is doing is giving out these federal funds, then that, project percentage, it makes a lot of sense, right? Whoever's getting the money should, help fund those fees a little bit more. But I think I understand now that there's a lot of other missions that WAMPO has, other than just giving up the federal funds that are really a pretty significant. And so that makes me feel like funding that exclusively with project fees is maybe a little less appropriate. So that's certainly changed my perspective there. Thank you.
Thank you. One last thing was on the 3% increase that will occur in the next TPP meeting. It would start from 2022 TIP projects. So Bel Aire is 2021 TIP project. So there would not be an additional fee that Bel Aire needs to pay. So I just want to mention that too. I don't know why we waited today, not did this last year, but it's a good thing for Bel Aire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we now have Mr. Jay Engelmeyer with NKEC to please come to the podium. Jay, it's going to give us an update on the Woodline project, which is a WAMPO funded project. So good segue.
I was going to say it is a good segue. Good evening, Jay Engelmeyer with MKEC. I'm sure I've been a familiar face the last couple of years, and as we all want to, is to get this project into the next phase of construction. I'm going to give you an update of where we're at. Some of it may be a repeat of things we've talked about in recent meetings. At this point, the plans are that the roadway plans are complete. Stamped them and sent them to KDOT. KDOT is in a process right now where they basically prep the plans for bidding. One of the things they do when they prep the plans for bidding is to make sure things like permits are done, railroad agreements are in place, right of way is in place and such. And as you folks know, we don't do at this point, we still do not have the railroad agreements in place. And therefore KDOT has come back and said, we want to push the project back a month or two, they suggested. Talking with Dan, we both agreed just to make sure it's done. We pushed it back from February, or we advised to push it back from February to April. So now our February bid is now April, and I know you're all aware of that. And I sad it happened. I'm trying to do what I can to get this done. In that process, there's a number of things we have to go through with the railroad. And I prepared, Ann asked that I prepare a timeline of what we did. I know there was some question about, well, was the ball dropped on our end or such? And I'm willing to go over that list with you. I think you've all seen that list. But we're to a point now where basically in the railroad, they have first, we go through an engineer agreement, where the engineer comes out, looks at the plans. And as part of that is an on-site diagnostic. I prepared the plans for the railroad back in February, talked to the railroad, and they said, well, we'll come out and we'll do a diagnostic in March. This was March 2020. Well, as we know, that's when the COVID pandemic hit, and the railroad went into a mode where, well, one, they went into a mode where they furloughed people. And then on top of that, they said, we're not coming out to any on-site meetings. That was lifted in June or July, basically, when they finally made contact and says, we're ready to move the process forward. And after that, expected things to move. I know the actual PE agreement with the city, between the city and the railroad, didn't get into the city's hands, I believe, until September. There has been a number of project manager changes on the railroad's end, and with no explanation, I don't know if that slowed things down or not, but I almost think every time a new manager came on board, there was almost a start over with their internal processes each time. So basically here, we had the on-site diagnostic in November, and since then, we've revised our plans to meet with the railroad's needs and got that back. As at this point, we do have a PE agreement, and then the PE folks send that information to the right-of-way group, where the right-of-way group then has to approve the project. We're in that process now. There are several things that happen in that right-of-way process. One, as our footprint of our project encroaches through the rail, meaning our roadways encroaching through their railroad right-of-way. In their opinion, it's the railroad right-of-way that all the highway right-of-way goes through. So one of the things we did is we changed the storm sewer alignment in that on-site diagnostic. We finally got, their engineering group has finally approved that. And so now we have that right-of-way footprint. We have track maps prepared for the railroad, and I'm waiting for them to, the right-of-way is correct. At this point, I would expect that to happen rather soon. I know who we're dealing with in right-of-way. I'm going to make frequent contacts. If you noticed on my list, I tried to make frequent contacts all throughout. Not sure making contact when I did, it didn't really help, but given this process, I know the railroad knows we're itchy to get this thing done. So I'm going to make frequent contact with these folks until we get everything done. Also, just if KDOT has any issues or questions at this point, or if the railroad has any issues or questions at this point, I promise I'm making resolving those issues my top priority, because I want to see this thing get out on the road and get constructed as soon as possible. I know you guys are itchy as well. Otherwise, on the project, private utilities are finishing up their relocations. We've got AT&T who's working on their last line, and it's up in the area at 45th Street where we have the Southern Star gas line. So I know that's a pretty tight spot for them. But they have told me they would be done by the 1st of February, or the first week or so in February is their deadline. West Star is done with their relocations everywhere, with the exception of the 45th Street intersection, and they have to move several poles. I don't have a clear date exactly from them at this point. They've been moving it back. I believe Cox, who didn't have much out there anyway, they're done or almost done with theirs. And Kansas Gas Service, I believe, has one line left to install, and they'll be out of the way. So we're in good shape with the utilities at this point. We did bid the city water and sanitary sewer work, which we'll talk about later, but that's moving forward as well. So that's more or less what I have to report as far as the schedule. But I'll answer any questions or discuss anything as far as the past schedule or the schedule forward if you have any.
Yeah, I do have a few questions myself. So I understand that UP Railroad needs to give license for utilities to go through their right of way for water and
Yes.
sewer lines. And
Yes.
you have sanitary sewer going through there. I don't know if we have a storm sewer going through there, because I think that was the issue, because you had to have them come out of that. Is that correct?
Well, there will be, the right-of-way folks will approve a permit for the sanitary sewer being installed underneath the track and the water.
So have we made those applications?
Yes, we have at this
Because I
point.
understand it's separate from.
It is separate, but one thing I've learned is until we get that PE agreement, I'm afraid to start that right-of-way process, just because if something changes, the right-of-way people want to see you start all over. And sometimes that means even new fees, new permit fees, or redoing the plan. So I did hold off on putting in the water and the sanitary sewer. We didn't know if we needed to do storm sewer or not. The PE folks have said, yes, you do, get that process started. And now all agreements for there's two storm sewers. They're not crossing the tracks, but they're one's picking up flow from the west side ditch and one's depositing into the east side ditch. So there's four, those two they call encroachments, or the other two are crossings, but we have everything we need into the railroad, and that process is moving.
But we haven't made those applications for those licenses to do the water.
Yes, we have. Those applications have been submitted
Okay. When were those submitted?
yesterday.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I do have some more.
Okay.
Let me make a note here. Okay, so you got back from UP Railroad, and Mr. Post in his email said that it takes 30 days for plan reviews, and you got those plan reviews back and they're approved.
That is
They
correct.
go back to the cost estimates as well?
What they do at that point, they approve the road plans, which that has happened because that prompts the right of way to start. He also sends it's work that the railroad wants done that they're going to charge to the city, but they're going to do themselves.
Okay.
So he gave an estimate to the city.
You did give us those cost estimates?
Yes, and I believe and then they were similar to what you'd seen earlier. One thing about those, there were things in our roadway plans that I didn't know if the railroad was going to do or our contractor was going to do. Some of those, their contractor is going to do, so they are being backed out of our project. The big thing is, and I think we talked about this early, is they're going to extend the actual railroad panels because they need to be extended to allow the sidewalk to cross in there. And then, of course, they're going to hire their own engineer to do whatever they need to do. And that estimate they give is a high number, and he even admitted it's high. It's a cost not to exceed, but basically he's letting the city know here's kind of the maximum it's going to be.
So have we approved those estimates and said we're okay with those?
Yeah, so they came in last week, I think, and it was about 90,000, and I went ahead and signed it just to not hold up any of the issues that we're having with them. So we got it, I signed it and sent it back.
Okay, so then Mr. Post said that once he has that, then he will submit informal approvals to Mr. Casey for the contractor's right-of-way agreement.
That's correct, and he has done that, or he said he has done that.
So Mr. Casey has that? Okay.
So Mr. Casey has what he needs there.
All right, very good. Have we provided to Mr. Casey directly the print base on the requested real estate?
Say that
We
question.
provided the print base on the requested real estate to Mr. Casey?
Yes, those are in my actual design plans, and they're shown in there. And Mr. Casey has those plans.
So he has those?
He has those plans now. That's maybe one thing that a lot of times gets changed before they will give the approval. So, but I should have the exact footprint of what we're disturbing and where we're putting improvements taken care of on those plans.
So if I were to call Mr. Casey tomorrow, he'd say, yes, I have those plans, yes, I got those cost estimates, everything. Now it falls in his court.
Yes.
Okay, very good. That's what I wanted. That's what I was hoping.
Okay. Well, now we submit him to a website. There's another gentleman that's been assigned to this. I don't know how closely he works with Mr. Casey, but I think given the situation and they know we're in a hurry, that Mr. Casey knows they're there.
Very good. So just, I try to temper this as best I can, but, in my mind, I'm sure everybody else's mind, there's a lot of frustration about this project because we are now projected to be a year and a half behind schedule to start construction. And that's just not a good situation to be in. I've done the surgery center, we did it in 6 months from shovel to opening with KDAG license approvals. So I can't, I'm not saying that this is anything equivalent, but I know that moving projects sometimes just takes something, take bull by the horn and go through. So I really, and I appreciate your willingness to come tonight and talk to us, but I really want to instill in our team, and that includes city staff, MKDC, and governing body, a sense of urgency on this project. We don't want to be sitting around waiting for something to happen. I looked in the timeline, I saw 4 months we were waiting for UP Railroad. I want to tell you tonight that if you ever see an issue like that again, and that's with railroads or KDHE or KDOT, not KDHE, KDOT in this case, or anybody else, contractors, anybody who's not giving timely responses, let us know. We're here to support you, to make sure this project moves. I will make phone calls if I need to. I will talk to whomever I need to do that. I'm sure all the council members here will be very supportive of that as well. We had, unfortunately, we had a 3-week delay from a contract being sent to us till time it was presented to city council. I realized that was the first meeting after. I'm saying, if we ever see that again, let's call a special meeting. Let's not wait 3 weeks. If it's 7 days, or if it's more than 7 days out, we need to call a special meeting to get that approved. We can't let that sit around. Because I tell you, from what I see in these emails, and I've only seen a handful of, it's just a few, not too many. But what I've seen in there is, it looks like UP is saying, well, this ball has been in Bel Aire's court all along. We just haven't done anything. They didn't see anything approved until October. Well, when you look at the timeline, there are a lot of efforts to get things done, but they weren't getting the message. So I do appreciate that, and I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page there. We're going to see a lot of agencies involved in this thing. This isn't the end. This is only the beginning. So I don't want to see any more delays that we can avoid, simply because we didn't let the right people know. Pick up the phone and call me if you need to. I'm sure Mr. Lasher will take care of that if that's needed. He knows how to get a hold of me, and even if I'm traveling or whatever I'm doing, I am not afraid to pick up the phone and talk to anybody. Okay? And I will do that. So I do appreciate your help. I do want everybody to be on the same page about this sense of urgency on this project, get it going. And I would suggest that we even tell UP Railroad, KDOT's drop dead date for a March 11th, okay, a bid letting. So I don't know what that date is.
I don't actually know what that date is, but I will ask. I will.
January 8th date for February bid letting that we couldn't make. But when I understand, I have a nephew that works for a different railroad. He says, if you tell them a date, they'll work to make the date, but they got to know what the drop dead date is. And, if we tell them the March date for the April bid letting, well, that's what they'll work to, is the March date.
Yeah.
And we get it on, if it's March 8th, they'll get it to us on March 7th. If we tell them the February date for March bid letting, they'll work to get that done. Now, I didn't hear that from UP. I heard that from my nephew who works for a different railroad, but I think that he has some insight there, knowledge of what goes on. So,
Okay.
We just don't want to give them any slack.
Okay.
On that.
And I just to say, first of all, my frustration was some of the early drop dead. I know this has been a strange year with COVID. I don't want to use that as an excuse. And I still think I could have been a little more diligent in contacting them. My experience with working with the big railroads is they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Since Tyler Post has been the engineering project manager, I think he has kept this thing moving. I just want to know, since Tyler took it over, everything's following the path that I believe it should be following. It was just some of the early changing of the project manager and such. But I think probably through your work, you have the railroad's attention, and I think they know where we're at, and I will keep moving on contact with Casey and with the other gentleman's name, and we're going to do everything we can to give them the information they need if and when they need additional information, and keep this thing going.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's just make sure we don't have any stones we haven't turned over.
Okay.
Don't let anything like him play around. Thank you.
All right.
Any questions from council members? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. You mentioned that Union Pacific was going to send out their engineers to do some engineering to figure out a crossing and some of the work that they were going to do. Is that a prerequisite to them granting us the right of way that we need to move things along from a bidding perspective?
Probably not. Some of that work, in fact, on some recent projects I'm working on with the UP, they basically said, we're going to come out and do our improvements. You have to adjust your construction schedule around it. That was a little different because they were replacing entire crossings across the street that we were trying to keep traffic on. Here, they're just extending, so it's really not going to have a large impact. They have some wiring, some signal wiring work, and we're lucky if they had to move signals, it would have been a much bigger deal. But I think they're just moving signals around. I don't believe any of their improvements is going to affect the construction of our project at all.
Or the acquisition of the right.
Or the acquisition of the right of way. In fact, most of their stuff's probably going to come later.
And then secondly, you talked about, moving that date by 2 months at this point. If the stars align through this newfound sense of urgency that we've been able to create, things come together before then, are we able to walk that back to the 1 month date, or is it definitely pushed 2 months at this
I think it's definitely pushed to. I don't think walking it back a month is going to be something KDOT will allow, even if, because they have projects lining up that they're preparing for bid. And this one we're waiting on a rail. Okay. And they're doing it by bid date. So they've already moved another project up that they're working on, I think. I can ask that question. But
I'd rather it be waiting for KDOT than waiting for us.
I would too.
So that's what I feel.
I've asked this on every occasion, but everything we're doing is to make sure that in the future, this road can be widened. So we're not gonna want the railroad to do anything that narrows the scope back down at that point in the railroad, are we?
The widening was always going to occur on the north side of the railroad. We know where the gates are, and we never wanted them to move the gates out because that's.
I'm not saying we want them to move them now, but we planned that in the future, it could be widened to 5 lanes with not much difficulty.
Correct.
And south of the railroad, it can be moved widened. It will be widened. So I don't want to see the railroad come in and say, you only need this much room, that's all we're gonna do. We gotta keep them on the 5-lane path so that we don't have to come back to them again in the future to move all our utilities that are going through that.
But even when we were talking about a 5-lane scenario all the way to 45th, we were always looking, going 5, coming back down to 3 through the railroad and coming back out. Going to 5-lane through the railroad would be a major investment on the railroad's part. They would redo gates and signals, and it could still happen in the
I
future.
don't think you're following me. I'm not asking them to do 5 lanes now. I'm asking them that anything that we
Okay.
do does not prevent us from doing 5 lanes in the future.
No,
So that we don't have to put this sewer in now here, and then when we decide to do 5 lanes, we gotta move it again and go through all this stuff with UP again.
right, that won't happen.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. We need a wide enough corridor so that when we finally decide to do that, we know they'll have to move the gates and all that other stuff. And that's something on expense on their end, but it's not gonna require us to move all our underground infrastructure.
No, all of that's under the existing roadway there anyway. No, yeah, we're not going to have to redo stuff if that's going to go to 5 lanes there in the future.
Okay.
There might be some storm pipes going to have to move, but we've always known that.
So that's what I'm trying to prevent. is us having-
Well, I mean-
Because it is such a long drawn out process with the railroad, I would like to not have, keep to a minimum what it is we have to move in the future.
we understand, but we're discharging storm sewer or actually picking up storm sewer in that railroad ditch. And at the location where it is, that would have to be moved. But when we talked about of the future 5-lane, even the inlets and such along the roadway, they're all going to have to move out to accommodate the 5 lanes. That was always being discussed.
We don't have to ask the UP for permission to do that. Since the UP seems to be the biggest obstacle in this entire project.
Well, if we move the road and in that section, we do anything in that railroad right away, this process is going to happen. We're going to have to go through this process again. I mean, we can't.
Shouldn't have to re-engineer all the storm sewers and water lines and everything like that.
Well, a lot of that, the engineering to relocate that would be easy, but still going through that railroad permit process is still going to happen. I mean, if
But if we already have the water line over here, we don't have to move it.
we don't have to move the water line and we won't have to move the sanitary sewer line. They should be good where they're at.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I want to make sure that we don't get funneled down and then have to go through a longer process because we didn't get it right the first time.
Sure. I understand, and we shouldn't have to do that.
Any other questions for Mr. Engelmeyer? I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you. And please let us know. if you need
I sure will.
Okay.
And I'll stick around if you have any questions about our water and sanitary sewer bids.
Very good. Thank you. Move on to item 11. Or 9. 9. Do we have citizen concerns? Do we have any citizens present who would like to speak? Clerk, did you get any,
No, Mayor, we did not receive any comments.
no comment? Okay, thank you. Move on to item 10, council member reports. Mr. Smith, would you like to start?
I have no report.
Dr. Schroeder.
I have no report.
Mr. Welch.
I have no report.
Mr. Welch.
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Visit goes well today.
Yeah, so I had, so for everyone's information, I had a 6-month checkup today in Kansas City at KU Med for my liver transplant. So everything is going as good as it can be, really. So I'm doing well. So I guess that's my report. Glad to be here.
Thank you. That's going well. Okay. So, on June 2nd of last year, I said on this bench that I condemn the rioting and destruction we have seen over the past week. Peaceful protest was the mantra of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and protest turned violence when protests turned to violence. They insult Dr. King's legacy. So on June 5th, we were all shocked with the violent assault on the U.S. Capitol. There is no room for this in a free society. Peaceful protest is our right. Violence is wrong in a free society. Vice President Mike Pence said on January 5th, after the Senate and House reconvened, I want to thank the federal, state, and local enforcement. The violence is quelled, the Capitol is secure, and the people's work continues. We condemn the violence that took place here in the strongest possible terms. We grieve the loss of life in these hollow halls, as well as the injuries suffered by those who defended our Capitol today. We will always be grateful to the men and women who stayed at their posts to defend this historic place. To those who wreaked havoc on our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. This is still the people's house. And as we reconvene in this chamber, the world will again witness the resilience and strength of our democracy, for even in the wake of unprecedented violence and vandalism at this Capitol, the elected representatives of the people of the United States have assembled again on the very same day to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So may God bless the lost, the injured, and the heroes forged on this day. May God bless all who serve here and those who protect this place. And may God bless the United States of America. Let's get back to work. And from that reopening statement, the Senate and Congress went back to work to complete the Electoral College tabulations. May all the Americans heed Vice President's words: violence never wins, freedom wins. Let us all keep the United States of America in our prayers so that freedom wins. And looks like Sedgwick County has plateaued on our COVID infections. It looks like we've grown 10, 11% for the last month. That's good news. Looking over KDHE's data on vaccines, Kansas has received and distributed about 202,225 vaccine doses. There's 101,822 have been vaccinated, 15,594 of the second dose. So just over 58% of the doses that Kansas has received have been injected in somebody's arm. Okay, so that's good news. I wish it would be faster. So it's better than the national average, is about 30%. I hope we get close to 100% right away. The more people we have vaccinated, safer everyone will be. To me, we should be running out of vaccines as quickly as we can until we get something in the neighborhood of 80% of the population vaccinated. My oldest brother did get vaccine last week, so finally somebody's getting some people in the population. He's in Idaho, so they have different rules. On January 12th, I did attend the WAMPO meeting that Mr. Carissa was here talking about the tip fees. We also heard from KDOT concerning the North Junction project. So a little update on that. The current green project is scheduled to complete in November of this year. So we'll see that construction done. That's a nice thing. The first phase of Gold project will be going out for bids very soon. This phase will build a new flyover ramp from northbound 135 to westbound 235. And that includes a ramp from the northbound 135 to eastbound K254. So that will be a nice improvement when that gets done, because that will help a lot of that traffic congestion in the evening on 135. It also will include a lane expansion on eastbound I-235 to southbound 135. And I don't quite understand that one, because I thought that was being rerouted, but they did say it was lane expansion. So I don't know the details about that part of the project. So at that, I will ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to update council and the public on a couple of Senate bills. The Senate is back in session, the Senate and the House, but this year they're moving unusually fast. One of the reasons is because the governor's emergency order that was in place that allowed a lot of the restrictions and safety measures that are in place to happen expires on January 26th. So in the way that the original legislation was passed, she couldn't extend it or do anything until the legislature passed a new emergency order. So they're working on that. Senate Bill 14 would extend the legally declared disaster through the end of March, and that would allow, continued special provisions, executive orders, FEMA money to come in, and allow all that to continue to go on under COVID. So that bill actually passed the Senate and is now scheduled for a House hearing next week. It passed with a lot of support, so we anticipate that January 26th, there will be another emergency order in place, so the county and everybody else can continue to administer their emergency orders. Second Senate bill to look out for is the tax lid bill. I know this came up on the council's legislative priorities. So generally, the public local entities generate revenue in several ways. One is through locally generated money, state aid, and federal aid. A large part of the local money comes from property tax revenues, and Kansas has actually had a tax lid in place for a very long time. I want to say around the 1930s, but I'm not sure, but it's much longer than I would have thought. Though the tax lid has changed depending on the extent of that lid has changed depending on who was in office and their priorities. The current tax lid we're under was updated in 2016 and requires that cities or counties cannot approve any budget which relies on property tax revenue to increase in an amount above the inflation rate without direct voter approval. So you can never pass a budget greater than the average inflation rate without taking it to the voters. Not really an issue for Bel Aire, but Bel Aire passes a neutral budget. There are some exceptions under this current tax lid, like if there were specials, special assessments somehow could be exempted, or emergency orders could be exempted to allow that property tax increase to go beyond the inflation rate, but not something that's a local issue here. But generally, localities do have an interest under home rule and just in generally having flexibility with the tax lid as it relates to property taxes. So a lot of localities want to be able to determine that on a local level. Senate Bill 13 was introduced during this session, and its primary goal is to repeal the tax lid, and it strives to increase the transparency. So it's kind of trying to handle both sides of the issue. It requires a new notice and hearing process as a part of local government's annual budgeting plan. So in that case, under this bill, local governments will be required to send out notices through the county, you'd have to determine if you're going to exceed the tax lid by mid-July I think it's like July 15th. You'd have to determine if you wanted to exceed the tax lid, and then from there send out notice, hearing, and then you could vote on it. You wouldn't have to take it to the voters. There's the cost of mailing that notice out. But with that notice, a government could set their own tax priority lid. So this was actually this bill was passed by the Senate and will be up for hearing tomorrow. And the hearing is available online for people to comment and weigh in. I know that it was interesting to Bel Aire. The league has taken a neutral position on it. They have provided some feedback, just wanting, their goal was to have it so that way cities, counties, and other taxing entities like school districts all follow the same rules. Not that cities had to send out this notice, but school districts and counties didn't. They just wanted it to be even across the board. And I think that's made it into the legislation at this point. We'll know more tomorrow. It just rises to the top because it seems like it's likely to be successful. So you'll probably be hearing more from Ted about this as if and when it does become law. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Go on to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have some important dates to announce. We've confirmed with Waste Connections that May 1st will be our e-recycling and shredding day. So it's typically the first Saturday in May. So we have that confirmed. May 15th will be the curbside cleanup day. And then October 23rd will be the fall curbside cleanup day. So we've got those reserved with Waste Connections. We're working on setting up the garage sale days for Bel Aire. And as soon as we get that set, then I'll share that with you. Those are the big questions. When's cleanup days, when's recycling, and when's the garage sales. So that's all I have.
Tell people this, they'll be asking what the garage sale is.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What was that October date again?
October 23rd.
Okay. That all? Did you have?
Yes, sir. That's all.
I didn't
Thank
want to Okay, very good. So now we'll go to item 11. A is professional service agreement with Garver for Woodlawn 37th, 45th. As Woodlawn expansion continues, the public utility relocation needs to take place. Since Garver is an engineering company who was selected by the council for construction observation of Woodlawn, city engineers is recommending Garver also observe the utility relocation. And Stevens is here to answer any questions.
So as the mayor said, Garver was the firm that was selected to perform the construction observation services or construction engineering, as you will hear from KDOT, for the Woodlawn project. As the committee had discussed, it was good for having to have them also perform the construction observation for the utility relocation project. So I asked them for a contract to put that together. That is before you tonight. Dakota Zimmerman and Eric Strecker are here from Garver. Would you guys mind standing up just so, I don't know if you have any questions from them, that they are here. Eric will be doing the majority of the day-to-day construction observation, and Dakota will be doing kind of the construction oversight. He is a licensed professional engineer in Kansas, so he does have the authority to sign off on all the documents that KDOT requires. So he will be keeping a close tab on the construction as it moves forward. Eric will, as I said, will be doing the day-to-day. They will be working closely together and with myself and the contractors, and with Jay with MKEC if any construction questions, if any engineering questions come up during the project. There is a small portion of City of Wichita relocations, utility relocations with this. Wichita does have a separate agreement with Garver. So you as a city council or City of Bel Aire will not be paying for any of City of Wichita's construction observation. That is a completely separate agreement. And as far as when we get into the construction side of things, everything is included in the agreement that you will be accepting tonight, but we do have a side agreement with Wichita for them to pay their share. And if you have any questions of either Dakota or Eric or myself, I'm happy to stand for them, as are they.
The one question that comes to mind, and it goes back to my discussion with Mike earlier, is these railroad utility agreements. And how long will it take to get those agreements in place so that this part of the project can commence to the right away?
And if I remember correctly, and Jay, please help me, the actual work that is being done under the right of way for both the water and the sewer is not part of this project. It's actually with the broader Woodlawn project. We wanted to get as many relocations as we could out of the way in advance of the broader Woodlawn project, the actual road reconstruction. But since we're working on the railroad with the street project, it made more sense to keep those utility relocations with the street project. So any agreements with the railroad will not delay this utility relocation project.
So if I understand what you're saying, then we would be seeing another utility relocation project to get the portion under the railroad done?
Not quite. Those utility relocations will be wrapped into the overall KDOT project and let as a part of the KDOT project. There will be separate groups in that KDOT project for non-KDOT funded items.
Okay.
And so they will truly be a part of that overall KDOT Woodlawn reconstruction project. The general contractor that is hired by KDOT for that project will probably hire a subcontractor to do the railroad transitions.
Okay. So that's kind of a normal process with the railroads to do it that way, or will KDOT do things that?
It's not necessarily normal to do it that way. Why we made that decision is when you were doing the work under the railroad, especially with the sanitary sewer, that's when there's going to be lane restrictions. And there's going to be the period of time when during the road work and some of the in storm sewer and other work, we're going to have just one lane on Woodlawn. This, if we would have kept the sanitary sewer work separate, we would have during the water and sewer project that same situation where we have to have one lane. We decided not to create that inconvenience of all that traffic restriction 2 different times. And so I think that will be felt. I mean, this water and sewer job will go a lot quicker because we're not crossing into the railroad tracks.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And just to add to that, there are times that when we worked with Wichita on the 37th Street reconstruction, all of our water line that we had to reconstruct was done as a part of the greater road project and bid with the road project. It can be done both ways. We opted for this route because we were hoping that it would be quicker, and in order to get our utility relocations out of the way in advance, or as many as we could in advance of the road construction project.
Okay, very good. Thank you, appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Stevens or Mr. Engelmeyer? Mr. Smith?
So when exactly will this work take place?
You will be accepting, hopefully, bids tonight, or a bid tonight for this project. So Dakota has already been in touch with the low bidder, assuming that they do get the project. We have a pre-construction meeting tentatively set up for the 25th. And I don't know, Dakota, have you heard on a tentative start date?
I have not. I was hoping to find out by the end of this week. The schedule, so we can get that information to you all.
And then what's the approximate duration?
70 working days within the contract, if I remember correctly.
So a little over, actually, that would be closer to 3 months by the time you add in weekends.
Any other questions or discussion on this subject? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll motion to accept the professional services agreement with Garber for Woodlawn 37th to 45th utility relocation in the amount of not to exceed $62,094 and authorize the mayor to sign.
First by Mr. Schroeder and second by Mr. Smith. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Move on to item B, and this is private utility location taking place along Woodlawn right away and Bel Aire water sewer mains now relocated, which we just talked about. Bids are solicited with Dollinger offering the low bid. City engineer is here to explain this work as well. Answer any questions.
So once again, this is the work for the utility water sewer relocations. As I mentioned before, Wichita does have some water or some relocations as well. As you can see, they have a separate group for their relocations. That it will be tracked separately as it is now, continuing on through. We will pay Donlinger, assuming you accept their bid, the entire amount. We will bill Wichita. Wichita will reimburse us for those costs. That was in the agreement that we accepted with Wichita a few months ago.
Do you remember the amount of that agreement?
It was whatever the bids. There really was not an amount stated. It was yeah, from whatever the bid amount came in as, which is the $159,490.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So we have two bids that are relatively close together there. One from Donlinger and one from Milwaukee. I naturally want to go with the low bid. The only question that I was contemplating was, do we feel confident that Donlinger has the availability to get started on this as quickly as we want to? And just, since there are two bids so close together, does one of them have the ability to move the project along faster than the other?
I've worked with both firms. I've actually worked with all three. They're all very responsive, very quick to get out. We've done Donlinger a big favor with the Bristol Hollows project. If you remember at the last meeting, we delayed that and allowed them to go to a different project instead of having crews tied up sitting. So with that in mind, they are definitely able to get in and get us started as quickly as possible. While we do not have a start date, part of that is just contracting. So they generally don't like to give us a start date before a contract's been accepted, which is understandable. But yeah, no, they're available.
We've had an availability conversation with them such that, you know, they know that we're going to look at this tonight, and if we say yes, then they've got the capacity to go after it.
Yes, Dakota has already been in touch with them. As I said, we've got a pre-construction meeting tentatively set for the 25th, so they are aware that they will more than likely get the project awarded tonight, not guaranteed. But if they do, they're gearing up their forces so they can start on it.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a couple of questions. Specific line items here. I noticed all of this being higher than what you estimated originally. And I see that a large portion of that is for a full depth at full cap and pipe abandoned in place. Can you explain where those asphalt patches are and why we have to pay for abandoning pipe?
So, and I may have Jay come up here to assist with this. The abandoning in place is, you never want a void underneath pavement or in a place where could have traffic or potential issues in the future. It just leads to problems. So that's why the pipe is abandoned in place. But in asphalt patches, I'll let Jay, I think that's for a connection point, but I'll let Jay explain.
I didn't understand your explanation of it abandoned in place. I asked why we have to pay to leave something there.
There's actually a procedure to abandon it. Like you don't want a void filled, so you do have to fill it. Yes, yes.
But that also would.
That's why we have to pay for
Okay.
something.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
also.
We're just laying a pipe,
Yeah,
a piece of
no.
pipe that I don't understand why we're paying.
Yeah.
Yes, well, again, I understand that.
And that also includes the disconnection of the line being abandoned from the actual main that's going to be in service. So there's several things contractors doing in that step. Why that was higher than what we expected, I don't have an answer for that. And same with the patches. It was higher than what I thought, and I was a little surprised.
Are those patches something we're gonna carry out?
Yes.
Again?
Yes,
So they'll be done twice.
yes.
And does it have any effect, because we're so early in the year, if they put it off a month or two, if we lower the price on that? Because
No,
are they having to get special asphalt plant?
they're patching with the cheapest asphalt they can get. It's not special, and it's going to last several months until the new pavement comes in. And even if we would have had all of this water line work done with the road project, they would likely have still had to do the patching, because when they're doing the water work, they're not necessarily doing the paving work exactly on top of it.
Oh, those are very fair questions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the bid from Dominic Grid, cost not to exceed $751,593 and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second. First from Mr. Smith and second from Mr. Welch. Any additional discussion, questions? Thank you. Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item C, consideration bid from Rock Springs Phase 7. So the developer is moving forward with Phase 7 of Rock Springs. Garber has completed the design work for water and sewer lanes. Bids were solicited from McCullough, submitting low bid, and Stevens is here to explain the project and answer any questions.
All right, I love seeing development moving forward, as I'm sure you guys do too. It means more rooftops. Yay. This is the final phase of Rock Spring Phase 7. So it's going to fill in the gap that currently exists between the initial Rock Spring and Rock Spring Second. So I'm glad we're finally getting to this point. There is a big thing to note for you guys. When I was reviewing the plans, there is a sanitary sewer line that runs along the south edge of Rock Spring Phase 7. This serves all the lots back there. As I was looking at the plans, I noticed that it backs up against Deer Run. Now, Deer Run is not currently in a phase where they are actively designing or getting ready to move forward at all, but it makes absolutely no sense to have two sanitary sewer next to each other when the 5 lots from Deer Run could just tap on to these lots from Rock Spring. So I brought that up to Mr. Henry, and he has been working to get in contact with Kevin Cowan, our bond counsel, and see, okay, how can we do this? Because generally if you have 10 lots that benefit from a sewer line, those 10 lots are assessed 1/10 of the cost of the sewer line. So trying to figure out how to work this through with these 5 additional lots, I instructed Garver to go ahead and put those 5 lots in as an alternate or figure out the financing later. Well, with COVID and with, Kevin has been affected in some way by COVID. I don't know the entire story. Ted's been trying to get a hold of him and has not had very good luck. So we're still kind of in a flux pattern as to how that works. But Ted did tell me that if nothing else, the city will pay for those 5 lots and then charge a benefit fee for those 5 lots of Deer Run to connect in the future. How that affects the remaining lots of Rock Springs, I'm not a finance person. I don't really know. I can't tell you at this point. That's a continuing conversation between myself, Ted, as well as Mr. Cowan. So the bids that we had were very good bids. They came in quite a bit under the engineer's estimate, which we were really excited about. We have worked with McCullough in the past, and they've done a great job. And it would be my recommendation that you accept the bid from McCullough for the water, sewer, and the alternate, which is those sanitary sewer taps for those 5 lots.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Welch, a question. When we come back and do sewer for Deer Run, would it tie into these pipes?
Just those 5 lots. The remaining.
It's platted for other lots.
Correct.
Come back and do the other lots, would those lots then tie in with the same main?
I do not believe that they would, because I believe, and I haven't looked at it very closely, but I believe that the ground is sloping in a different direction. And so they would take the sewer for the rest of it into a different direction. But even if it did tie in to this sewer main, then the elevations, the sewer main is sized appropriately to accept the sewer.
curious. I'm not sure. Thanks so much.
Mr. Mayor. Is this, so just so I'm clear, is this for a line that like runs down from 53rd Street, or is this just tapped into the main that already runs down the north?
This taps into the existing main that already serves
These are
the
just
existing
offshoots from the
phases.
main for those lots, and because the lots in Deer Run back to exactly to these other lots, we want to run taps for both sides.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
that makes sense.
Any other questions or concerns?
I'd make a motion to approve the bid from McCullough in a not to exceed amount of $81,260 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
First from Mr. Welch, a second from Mr. Elsoff. Any additional questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item D, developer of the lot across from City Hall is requesting closing to be moved until April. Since the city is part of the development plan, council must approve the amendment. And the land bank met last Tuesday and also approved the amendment. We talked about this last Tuesday, but any additional discussion if you'd like.
Mr. Mayor,
Sure, Dr. Scherzer.
I motion to accept the amendment to development agreement by and between the city of Bel Aire, the city of Bel Aire Land Bank, and David Key, and assigns as buyer lot 1, block 19, Central Park petition, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I've got a question. Does this involve any financial arrangement, or would that be between the developer and the land bank?
So the agreement, as far as the financial piece of it, has not changed. So what the agreement was between the city of Bel Aire, the land bank, and the David Key that was approved stays the same. The only thing that's changing is the closing date.
Okay, that was not quite how I remember the land bank motion on that. I believe, especially since I made the motion, I thought he was objecting to us asking for 10,000 more on my motion, that we asked for 5,000 more.
That's not how I remember it. I know 5,000 is the standard that we initially got, but I don't recall an additional 5,000 to the original that we got.
That's why I'm asking, because I noticed in the land bank, we didn't ask for any additional money either. That was not how I remembered it.
Right.
It was printed out on the document, an additional 5,000. We talked about how that was going to be changed, if I recall correctly.
Right.
So it ended up to not adding anything, but the document in front of us said to add. It might be what you were.
Or that referred to the original, something like that, right? I can't remember which one of those two it
That's
was.
why I was kind of confused, because I thought we
Yeah.
agreed to another additional 5,000. I'm not persnickety about that, but I'm just not remembering the same way.
Yeah, no, there was discussion about it, but in the end, the land bank decided to take that portion out of what was presented so that there's no change in the earnest money.
Okay, well, since 3 people remember different than me, I must remember. Okay, where were we in the motion?
Well, I have a first by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Smith. So he came in just as you were asking your question, so.
I think you had 2 seconds, so.
I'm sorry?
I think you had 2 seconds.
I seconded it
Oh,
as
did
well.
you second also? Okay.
Make sure it's-
I didn't hear this, okay.
Well, you heard one.
Any additional questions, discussions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Item E is the legislative session has begun in Topeka and legislature continues to meet in Washington. The governing body created a top 5 priority list of legislation that may be considered this year. At the January workshop, we reviewed the LKN legislative policy and selected the 5 most important legislative topics that can be negatively or positively affect Bel Aire. There are a letter, these are in a letter for me to sign and send to our delegates, and there are additional comments and changes. And I did want to make a note here that I've heard the city of Wichita was encouraging the expansion of Medicare, and that was something you talked about, but in a workshop decided not to include in this issue here. I'm not asking to do that, I just wanted you to be aware that that's what the city of Wichita is considering doing. I don't know what they decided today, but I know it was on their agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I did send a proposed revision to our city attorney, and I think she may have communicated that proposal out as an alternate. My suggestion to the letter was to amend item number 1 and strike the highlighted text that's in front of you, just for, in the spirit of conciseness. As I read the letter, most of the items we've had on here are pretty clear, concise, and direct about what we're asking our representatives to do. And the tax code repeal, in my opinion, had a lot of unnecessary verbiage that maybe could be removed. So it's not something I'm incredibly passionate about, but it is a suggestion that I wanted to put on the table.
And Mr. Mayor, having read Mr. Smith's revision, I asked to revise that we leave in the sentence highlighted in red, if you have that copy in front of you, which just the sentence says each year the city's budget focuses on maintaining high service delivery levels. I just think that's important to state that we're doing the best job we can. We want them to stay out of it.
I'm fine with both of those revisions. I agree. Concise is good. The shorter, at some point, the likelihood someone paid attention, so that's good. And if Councilman Welch feels like that, once that sentence needed to be added, I'm fine with that as well.
Any other discussion?
Well, I guess I'll just say, Mr. Mayor, that I agree. I think both the proposals by Councilman Smith and Councilman Welch.
Do we have a motion?
Mr.
Smith,
I'll make a motion to accept the amended legislative priorities letter for the 2021 State of Kansas legislative session and authorize the mayor to sign.
We need to be clear that we're striking the.
Do we need to say as amended in that?
He did.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry.
as amended.
I'll second.
To be clear, the amendment is striking all the highlighted text except the sentence that Councilman Welch read aloud.
Second.
First by Mr. Smith and second by Dr. Schroeder. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. I have no need for an executive session. Is there any need that anyone has?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask for a very brief executive session. I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of non-elected personnel pursuant to the KSA 754319 section for attorney-client privilege or for non-elected personnel. I think is the right word there. But city manager and city attorney, the meeting will be for a period of 10 minutes and the open meeting will resume at 8:45 in city council chamber in this room, whatever it's called.
Okay.
A second.
I have a motion and a second for the executive session. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session for 10 minutes. Okay, we're gonna hold on executive session until they get the microphone situation figured out because we can't have it being broadcast. So, do we have to call the motion?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go to the senior room. Let's do that. Very good, thank you for that idea.
I'm gonna grab my stuff and take off. Okay. Because I don't really need to stay here for them to come in and adjourn. Okay. Thanks, you too.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Around.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we all do. It doesn't look like the link should be too long. Yeah. All right, have a good night.
Yeah, you should take care.
Okay, we held the executive session, no binding action was taken. I call the meeting back to order. Move on to item 13, discussion of future issues. Are there any further discussion or future issues to consider?
Mr. Mayor, I'll motion to adjourn.
A motion for Dr. Schroeder and a second from Mr. Welch to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. We could do a land bank meeting. 5-minute break, 15 break, whatever. Yes, please.
I
think we all knew that was a good hand raise, that's why I said, fortunately, they're.